That's one of those sub jokes. It's I'm saying this kind of racist thing, but I'm taking it back. So let's pretend as if everything is okay. Yeah, that's not funny.
Well, and that just gives you the backdrop, because what happened after the primary, to give some reasoning as to why we were able to achieve almost 25% of the vote, they demeaned a lot of the voters by saying that a lot of people voted for me because of my last name, because I predominantly won all of the Valley of Texas, all of South Texas, which is predominantly Latino. And they minimized our campaign and our efforts by saying, well, they just voted her because of her last name. And I said, how dare you? Because people that are out there going to vote, that are serious voters, are taking the time to vote. They don't just go and simply vote because of my last name. If that's the case, they would have voted for Beto, because Beto is supposedly a Latino nickname.
Yeah, they're trying to find a way to explain why you were able to get 25% of the vote with the minor funds that you had at your disposal. And that's a way of trying to minimize that. And not just that, even if that's true, those people were voting for somebody who they thought was going to represent their interests, because apparently the people they were voting for prior was not. I mean, like, that's a gross level of politics.
People do care about policies, and a lot of people showed up to vote early for that same reason. And those are the most serious voters that show up and go out and vote in the primary.
Yeah.
And that was offensive to me. It was offensive to what we did. It demoralized the movement. It demoralized our policies and what we stood for and the real issues that really mattered.
That's aggravating. That's aggravating to hear. When you had a conversation with Beto, for whatever reason, decided that he wanted to, I guess you guys wanted to meet and talk.
I did.
He did.
Okay.
Why? I'm curious about something. I was reading an article that said you guys were having a conversation about like Medicare for all and of these other type policies. And you say he was holding his chin, staring at you with this kind of, quizzical, not necessarily sure how to take you on this. But your main thing to him was, tell me that you'll support these policies and I'll back you.
Mm-hmm.
And what was
it? I didn't just tell him or ask him or, try to negotiate a deal. And again, if it was up to me, I wouldn't have met with him. But again, it wasn't my decision. It was the decision of those voters, the people who donated, the people who I am, fighting for. I owed it to them to at least come to the table and talk with O'Rourke and try to get him to adopt a lot of our issues on our platform. And when I said, I'm not here for anything else other than, negotiating these things. And if you want us to support you, we also need you to follow through. You're currently in office, in a position to sign a lot of these bills, legislation that's on the table. One of those is Medicare for All, HR 676. Now we need you to support it. We need not just say it, but we need you to follow through. And he said, no.
Yeah, he was against it for the most part. Like we were talking in the beginning.
He said he did.
Go ahead.
Oh, he said he didn't care if it was popular, that National Nurses United supported Senate Bill 1804. And I said National Nurses United also supports HR 676. Hell, they co-wrote it along with a lot of the doctors and nurses and activists put this together. Yeah. So for him to say or make it seem as if I didn't know what I was talking about was completely disrespectful and disingenuous of him to assume that I don't know my facts, that I didn't do my research.
Yeah. I guess the most important thing here is, though, he's not for it. Beto, one of the things that Beto did during this campaign was given this kind of, and I said as a passive ask, but this soaring rhetoric, this language that makes him comes across as he's more of a lefty than what he actually is. Mm-hmm. And you get down to the brass tacks of policy, and for the most part, he's just a centrist. He's not, regardless of how he sounds, those videos, in a sense, were, like you said, crafted by people who used to work for the campaign to give him this kind of lefty feel, without necessarily having the policy to back up that quote unquote lefty feel. Is that fair? I mean, I think that's a fair characterization, but would you agree with it?
Well, he hired people from within the Sanders campaign to rebrand him as someone who supports Sanders' ideas. And a lot of the articles that I've come across, they said that he adopted Sanders' fundraising methods. And they called him a Bernie crat type because of that. But it wasn't
so
anywhere
bizarre.
near the policies. It wasn't because of the policies.
So bizarre. He's crazy. Correct. Like that doesn't make him a Bernie. Oh God, yeah.
Well, a fundraising method doesn't make him a Bernie crat, but a lot of those people were hired to do just that and to rebrand him. And he hired a lot of the same people that Sanders hired. But when it came right down to it, as far as policies, they were on opposite sides.
Yeah.
Clearly Sanders is far more progressive, and he's not ashamed of the label. He's not ashamed of adopting those progressive issues or the agenda. Whereas to O'Rourke, he talked a good game, and that was great. But again, it had a lot to do with the people he surrounded himself with, told them what to do and how to do it and how to brand him, how to use his name recognition and raise funds to create a name for himself on a national stage. So a lot of those same people who worked on his campaign also prevented an actual democratic process to happen within the primary, even dodging debates. I'm not sure if it was him. I'm not sure if it was his people. But had we had a decent debate between him, myself, and the other gentleman, Edward Kimbrough, that would have been a democratic process worthy of anyone claiming to be part of a progressive movement or support a progressive agenda. Progressives don't dodge debates. Simple.
So he didn't have any debates with you during the primaries at all. For the most part, he just let the money swamp out the process.
Correct. So in November of 2016, someone recorded and confronted him, asking him, now that Sema and other people are on the ballot, will you have a debate? He said yes. In the month of January 2018, he again confirmed that he would have a debate, but he dodged those debates, and finally his campaign team came around and they wanted a debate on the last day of early voting, and they wanted it in El Paso, in his district, in his city. And I said, how dare you? This is so disingenuous of you to claim that you believe in a democracy and a democratic process, but you continue to circumvent these debates to fit your schedule. And I thought to myself, how arrogant of him, how elitist of him to want to debate on his time in his city, how he wants it with his people, instead of having it in a city which is the third, if not the fourth largest city in the United States, with the most diverse population that would get a lot of media coverage. Why didn't he just accept the debate?
Well, from the standpoint of people like Beto, when you have an advantage of that much cash, it's a disincentive. Like there's a disincentive. It's from a politics standpoint, taking out right or wrong, taking out whether or not you should do it for the betterment of democracy, taking out all of the reasons that, let's say, these high ideals of why somebody would do something like that, taking away all of that stuff, and you're left with just the basic, grim, dirty politics of it. It is to his advantage to say, I don't want to do it, and to run from that. Sanders, if you remember, was running against that guy in his district. Sanders had a debate, even though Sanders was beating the guy by like 60% of points. But many people avoid that like the plague when they think that there's any chance to the debate with you, because he didn't want to take the opportunity or the chance that you could essentially win that election just based on disparity between the two people.
Well, and again, that goes to show that it's either him or his campaign people who claim they work for Sanders and believe in this democratic process, that claim to be progressives, that saw this happen in 2016, where there was debates that were promised and debates that were dodged. Yeah. These same people who claim to work for the Sanders campaign, now working for Beto O'Rourke, managed to do the same thing as the Hillary Clinton campaign, dodge debates. So you got to question the integrity of the people that you surround yourself with and who is handling your campaign, whether if it was them or if it was direct orders from the candidate himself. So you got to question their motives.
Let me ask you this, from your vantage point, when I started doing the channel, there's things that you learn when you start doing the channel. it's like the I know before. From the standpoint of the election, what are the things that you learned that you wouldn't have known from outside of trying to run for office?
Well, I learned to not get so hung up on people's discussions or arguments, whether I'm worthy of running or whether I have built a political career for running. A lot of the advice that I got along the way, I completely disregarded because it went against my own instinct. So a lot of it was, you should run for a smaller office. Or in the case of Justice Democrats, you should run as a Republican. And
that's another thing that I thought was so bizarre. Explain that part. I mean, talk about that part, and then we can get to Justice Democrats, because I know there was issues with that.
Oh, there's a lot of issues with it, but it's what we learned in the process is sometimes organizations have an interest of just backing a candidate who has a better chance of winning. And strategy was, I'm running in a red state against Ted Cruz. At the very least, I can take him out as a Republican. And I said, I can't be a Republican. That's just not in me. I don't support Republican policies. I support progressive policies. But even progressives themselves that were in our group of circles that have worked on different campaigns, they have suggested for me to run a smaller office that I could afford to run in. Yeah. And I said, quite honestly, even people within our local organizations had said to me, maybe you should consider running for a smaller office. I said, maybe you should reconsider calling yourself a progressive, because honestly, we don't have that kind of time to be running for a smaller office. And the kind of change that I want to bring about isn't just for my city council or my county or my district or my state. The kind of change I want to bring about should and will affect a lot of people, not just in my state, not just in the United States, but worldwide, because we're talking about ending the over-militarization, the occupation in different areas, and to start talking about peace and diplomacy instead of dropping warheads on people, on countries and nations that are predominantly Black and brown, that cause the humanitarian crisis that, of course, are leading now to our borders and criminalizing of that. So it's more than just, well, you should wait your turn. And I told him, this was never about me as a candidate or as a person, as an individual. This is more about bringing change for everyone and backing a moral movement, a radical moral movement for a positive change for every single one of us. And so people with privilege don't tend to understand where I'm coming from, because they haven't lived what we have lived, what we consider everyday life. Yeah. The people in DC live in their own bubble. They make decisions based on their lifestyle and what they see and what they experience, without stepping outside of it and getting to know what our daily struggle is just to keep a roof over our head.